So a couple of thoughts associated with that. So the first thing I would say is work properly done. So that would be in the garden, unself-consciously, motivated by covenant with the highest good. That becomes play.
Yeah, good.
Right, but I even mean that technically. Like,
yes, yeah.
So imagine there is a form of work that allows you not to sacrifice the present to the future, but to align it perfectly. Okay, I think that's signaled by the emergence of the spirit of play. So the kingdom of God is the garden in which mankind can eternally play. And the play would be musical. So it would be, you could conceptualize heaven as an upward moving spiral where everything is as good as you could imagine it, but it's getting better.
It's getting better,
Exactly, like a piece of music does when it unfolds. It's already perfect, but it's still reaching higher and higher heights. That's the highest form of play, this spiral upwards. Okay, we have an independent biological circuit for marking the presence of that spirit of play. Okay, so let me add one more thing to that.
Go ahead, please.
Well, just to pull in the symbolism of the Mass, then we could say in parallel that sacrifice properly undertaken, so that would be voluntary, is indistinguishable from celebration. And then you might say, well, could you get to the point where you could celebrate the crucifixion? And then, so let's imagine that practically. So what that would mean is that you came to regard your mortal vulnerability as a blessing, not merely as something that you could hoist and bear, because there's certainly that element, but more than that, beyond that you would take it on as a gift. You know, I saw this triptych in Australia that really shocked me. It was an Orthodox triptych. The central panel showed Christ in front of the cross, inviting. And I thought, oh my God, could you possibly have a more perverse invitation than the invitation to the cross? And the answer to that is obviously no, because an invitation to the cross is an invitation to bear the voluntary suffering of life. But more than that, even to will the encounter with hell itself, right? So it's literally an invitation to fully confront the worst of all possible realities or potentialities. But then you think, okay, let's be sensible about this. How the hell are you going to adapt to your life if you shy away from mortality and malevolence? There's no way you can have a full adaptation to life if you hide from that shadow. And so then you might say, well, I can't confront it fully because it would tear me to pieces and destroy me. But I would say, no, if you did that voluntarily, in faith, it would destroy sin in you. It wouldn't destroy you. Now, if you were rife with sin, that might feel a lot like destruction. But well, that's a different issue to some degree.
I loved your stuff about play because play is such a key idea. Go right back to Aristotle. I mean, those things that are sought for their own sake are always higher than those sought for the sake of something else. And so the highest activities are forms of play. They're good in themselves. I do them because they're good to do. You and I are engaging in play right now. It's something good in itself to be talking about ideas and I'm not looking for some. Right. I'm not looking for something beyond this. This will lead. No, I'm right in this moment, Well, Romano Guardini and the leaders of the liturgical movement, early 20th century, wanted to bring forward this idea of the Mass as play. The Mass is the most useless thing that we can do. And I use that language a lot. It always draws people up short. But I say, look, the Mass, which is outside of time, it's not meant to lead to anything else.
Right. It's not instrumental.
Right. And we're being drawn into precisely the dying and rising of Jesus. And so that's why it's the supreme form of play. And that's why, I put on fancy vestments and I incense and I light candles and we move around in a kind of like liturgical dance, et cetera. Well, all of that is expressive of play.
It is a play. Yeah.
Right. It's a play. Who saw that very clearly was Chesterton, who was a very playful figure. But he saw that that kids love to dress up and they love to do. Well, there's the Mass. So we dress up in fancy garb and we carry candles around and we sing and we dance. And so Well, what's the Mass but a reflection of the prayer that was in the temple in Jerusalem, which in turn, they claim, was meant to imitate the dance of David before the ark as he comes into Jerusalem. So it's a playful dance that the church does at the summit. So we say the source and summit of the Christian life is the Eucharist. Well, there's your summum bonum, right? It's the praise that aligns us to the summum bonum, and that's a playful space to be in.
Okay, two things there. So we could say that the Mass is an attempt to dramatize the transformation of death and hell into play. That's a very difficult transformation to pull off. But you could see it as a kind of ultimate. You take the worst thing possible, and that isn't just death, because hell is worse than death. And if you don't understand that, you're kind of a fool. And people might say, well, what's your proof of that? And I would say, well, most people who are traumatized, so shattered, they're shattered by an encounter with malevolence, not an encounter with tragedy.
Right.
So
it's
tragedy
beyond just
is bad
something
enough.
bad happened.
It's yeah, exactly. It's right. It's sort of like purposeless bad, or worse, intentional bad, right? So there are levels that are worse than death. Okay, now you could take death and hell, as sort of exemplars of what is most unbearable, and you could transform them. Like the ultimate alchemical endeavor would be to transform those into play. That's the same as finding the gold of most value, the pearl of the highest price that the worst possible dragon guards. It's the same thing. So there's that. Now, you talked about concentration on the moment. Okay, so this is how the Sermon on the Mount looks to me. Tell me what you think about this. We're going to discuss this in our gospel seminar that's coming up in April. All right, so essentially what Christ does in the Sermon on the Mount is he says, orient yourself so that you are acting out your covenant with God in all matters. So that has to be first and foremost in your structure of attention. So that would be, I'm here to serve whatever is highest. And that would include my willingness to even transform what I conceptualize as the highest as I learn. But that's my goal. So our goal in this conversation, let's say to the degree that we're doing that truly, is that we're doing nothing but trying to pursue the truth. And we're trying to do that in the spirit of whatever's highest. We want to foster life more abundant, let's say. We want to rectify suffering to the degree that that's possible. And we're inquiring in how to do that. Okay, so first of all, you set your aim. And the proper aim is the highest aim, always. Okay, now once you do that, and that's aligned with the desire to treat other people as you would like to be treated, right? So that's part of that. And that's that iterative altruism. That's part of that structure of aiming highest. Okay, so then the next thing that Christ implies is that sufficient unto the day. And so what that would mean is that if you aim properly at the highest, then you can now focus all your attention with faith and productivity on exactly what's happening right now. And if you do that with enough intensity, that will be sufficient. But that's also, I would say, that's also the revelation of the kingdom of God. Because if you are aiming at what's highest and you are absolutely attending to the moment, then you're walking with God in the eternal garden. You lose all your self-consciousness. You're in that state of play that's simultaneously transformative, right? And that's going to suffuse you with a sense of sufficient and sustaining meaning. And I think that's, by the way, I think just this might be of some interest to you. I think we actually know how that all operates now at a neurophysiological level. Like, I actually think that the neuroscience and these theological concepts have converged. So, and I've talked to a number of neuroscientists about this, not quite as explicitly as we're doing, but like, it's certainly the case that our primary positive emotion system, mediated by dopamine, let's say, that's a treasure-seeking system. And it's definitely the case that we feel the most positive emotion when we see progress towards the highest possible goal.
Yeah.
That's literally how it works.